Give me a minute. Everybody knows this is the new long-range Flamingo missile from the Ukrainians, right? 1-ton warhead, 3,000-kilometer range, about 2,000 miles. And I reported, because a number of analysts have suggested that this is really a UK defense contractor's missile called the FP5. And in fact, the Ukrainians call it the FP5 Flamingo. And it looks just like the British designer and everything. However, I would be remiss if I did not point out that this guy, do you know this guy, Operator Starsky? Ukrainian Armed Forces press officer who is a great source of information about Ukraine. Obviously biased, right? Ukrainian Armed Forces guy, but great knowledge and a great perspective on the war. He reported in a video that I watched today that in fact this missile was designed, engineered, and built in Ukraine. And that those people who say it resembles the FP5 from the British, it's purely a coincidence. This is what he's saying, right? So the bottom line here, guys, is I don't know. There are analysts that I trust that are saying that this is an off-the-shelf piece of equipment that the Ukrainians might have bought a license to and be building in Ukraine. And then you have there's no more of a Kyiv insider than this guy, I don't think. Or at least UAF insider, right? And he's saying no. Designed, engineered, built in Ukraine. Now look, there's lots of reasons why the British might not want the Russians thinking they're selling these missiles to the Ukrainians. There's lots of reasons for the Ukrainians to make sure the world knows that they have the capabilities and the chutzpah to build a weapon like this. The fog of war is thick around the Flamingo. Even just the name, right? The name comes because apparently some of the fiberglass shell in the early prototypes came out pink for some reason. And that's how the missile got its name. Well, that would tell you that Operator Starsky is telling the truth when he says that it was designed, engineered, and built in Ukraine because they had this problem from whence we get the name. Now, again, look, I don't know, right? If anybody could do it, the Ukrainians could. And we don't know how long such a long-range missile program may have been going on for. So it's entirely possible that this is fully homegrown. I think it's possible, too, that the Ukrainians bought a license for the production of this missile and they're producing it. I don't know. But the idea that Ukraine has a 1-ton missile that it says it can produce 30 a month of now, but by October, production will be up to 210 a month. The game changer word is overused, and there's hardly ever a single weapon that would be a game changer. Except here's the thing. We've been watching the Ukrainians for 2 years now pound oil refineries with drones. But drones are small. Oil refineries are big. The Russians fix the damage and the oil refinery gets reopened. You start hitting these places with 1,000-pound bombs, that equation is going to change very fucking fast. And if Russia loses its purse strings, right? If the cash flow into the country stops because they don't have the product to sell on the open market, you can't run an army without diesel. It's not a thing. And right now, diesel's being rationed in the far east of the country. Across the country, queues here, I can show you. Across the country now, right? It started out just the temporarily occupied territories, the oblasts along the border, and in the far, far east. But now, all across the country, lines of 100 cars at the gas station are common. Lines more than a kilometer long are common. A92 and A95 which I believe are roughly equivalent to US 92 and 95 octane. These fuels have hit record highs, as has diesel, at $3.60 a gallon for diesel. That's a record high in Russia. It's also important to remember that the Russians don't make the kind of money that Americans make. On a purchasing power parity analysis, that would be the equivalent of Americans paying $13 a gallon for diesel, because the average Russian makes about 1/10 of what the average American makes. So the gas station with nukes appears to now just have nukes mostly. And that's all they got, which is why it's what they threaten us with, because it's all they got left. The Russian economy is collapsing. Izvestia reported today that 50% of all Russians are looking for or have secured second jobs, and that the average Russian is now working 55 hours a week just to pay the rent and keep himself fed. This is not going to go well. None of this is going to go well for the Russians. And when the collapse comes, it will happen very fast. So keep your eyes peeled. The dominoes are falling.